When we were taken into custody, I thought I was being saved, rescued. And then later on, I realized that we weren't being rescued at all, and that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would last for 17 years.
Sunny Jacobs and her husband were jailed for murder. Sunny's husband was executed in the electric chair for the crime. But after 17 years, previously suppressed evidence was uncovered proving them innocent of the crime. Sunny was released. But 17 years of her life are gone, and her husband is dead. Are some injustices too great to be forgiven? What does it mean to forgive? Hillary Carr reports.
The year was 1976. Sunny Jacobs received a call from Jesse Tefero, her common-law husband and the man of her dreams. Every once in a while, Jesse left to go earn some extra money for the family. Sunny didn't know how he earned it, and she didn't want to know. Jesse Tefero had promised Sunny this particular trip would be the last. But the business he was conducting with his friends in South Florida fell through, leaving him broke and in need of her help.
I packed up the kids in this old car that we had with a case of oil, because it was the kind of car that just spewed black smoke out behind it down the road, and every once in a while you had to stop and pour in another can of oil and spew more black smoke. And I drove with the kids, breastfeeding my daughter, singing songs to my son, driving.
After picking up Jesse, their old car broke down. So they called one of Jesse's friends, ex-con Walter Norman Rhodes. Rhodes eventually agreed to take them to another friend's house where they would wait for money to be wired from her parents. But it was getting late, so they pulled into a rest area to sleep. In the early morning hours, Trooper Philip Black and visiting Canadian Constable Donald Irwin stopped to do a routine check. In the process, ex-con Walter Rhodes shot and killed both officers.
And so I covered the children, and then when the shooting stopped, I looked up to see where Jesse was, to see if he was okay. And he was standing there now in the middle of the cars, and Walter Rhodes was running from around the cars with a gun in his hand, saying that we were to take the police car and to hurry.
Sunny wanted to stay behind, but because they were eyewitnesses to the murder, Rhodes threatened to kill them. He drove the terrified hostages to the parking lot of a retirement home, where he kidnapped an elderly man and stole his car.
We could hear the helicopters overhead, and I knew that we were rescued at that point because it was all over. I knew the police were onto us, and there was obviously a roadblock. And so when we got to where we could see the roadblock, Mr. Rhodes made some sort of snap last-minute decision, and he swerved hard to the left, I assume trying to avoid the roadblock, and that's when the police opened fire. They had a whole line of policemen with long guns, rifles of some sort, and they basically blasted the car. It was the most extraordinary thing, because I knew that they knew there were hostages in that car, and I didn't know at the time, but the man's wife had called the police, so they absolutely knew with certainty that there were hostages, including women and children, in the car.
Miraculously, Walter Rhodes was the only one hit in the barrage of gunfire. The police pulled him out of the car and placed him in an ambulance.
So they took Walter Rhodes out and put him in an ambulance. They brought the old man out of the car, and then they took Jesse out of the car and handcuffed him. I was standing in the crowd at that point watching. And then a policeman came out of the crowd with his gun turned around with the butt end forward and smashed Jesse in the side of the head and knocked him to the ground. At that point, I ran over and threw myself over him, because the man had raised his gun again, and it looked to me like he was going to just smash his head in. So I covered him with my body, and at that point, I was arrested and pulled off of Jesse, and they took the children in one car, and they took me in another, and Jesse in another, and on the ride to the substation, the first of, I think, 3 police stations that we were taken to before we were finally taken to the main one, they pulled off the side of the road to argue between them, the police, whether or not to take us in or to take us over to some railroad tracks to kill us and say that we had tried to escape.
Fortunately, those who argued to take them in prevailed. Sunny was taken to the police station and not allowed to see her 9-year-old son or her 10-month-old daughter.
And I tried to tell them that she didn't know how to drink from a bottle, that she was nursing. No one would listen to me. And I never knew where she was taken, and I was never allowed to communicate that information to whoever was taking care of her until finally, after about a month, my parents were able to get the custody of my daughter, and then it took almost another month to get custody of my son, who was kept in a juvenile detention center in isolation because he was so young.
At the trial, the prosecution bolstered its case against Sunny by intimidating a cellmate arrested for possessing diet pills. They told her she could go free if she helped them get a conviction, but could face years in jail if she didn't.
It became apparent to me at that point in time that they weren't looking for truth. They were looking for conviction, and that things were not what they were supposed to be.
In order to avoid the electric chair, Walter Rhodes plea bargained for 3 life sentences in exchange for his incriminating testimony against Sunny and Jesse. Jesse Tefero's trial lasted only 4 days, after which he was convicted and sentenced to death. A jury found Sunny Jacobs guilty and sentenced her to life in prison. But the judge, a former highway patrol officer, overruled the jury and illegally sentenced her to death.
And I think he knew eventually that his sentence would be overturned, but that he would get a good chunk of my life in the meantime, and he did.
We'll have more of this amazing story when we come back.
Are you looking for a way to change your life? The answer may be as easy as watching TV. Introducing Hello Channel, an exciting new channel that's designed to teach you to speak English. New opportunities will be available to you when you learn the language of the internet, commerce, travel, and diplomacy. No need to pay for your expensive schools or tutors. You can learn English by watching Hello Channel. Invest in yourself. For a brighter future, say hello.
On the basis of tainted evidence, Sunny Jacobs and her husband Jesse were convicted of killing 2 police officers. Both were sentenced to death.
I was very angry and very disillusioned. And I'd lost all faith in anything I'd been taught to believe in, including God. I was real mad at him. For letting this happen. I couldn't imagine. I had never hurt anyone in my entire life. I never even was in a fight. And now this. Basically, I spent the whole time in solitary confinement, which was also a form of sensory deprivation because there was no one there. They cleared out a building and put me in it. And I stayed in it by myself. I was the only one who lived in that building. So the only sound I heard was the sounds that I made, and the only movement in the room, in the cell, was the movement that I created. And so at first I was very, very angry, and I paced the floor, and it was more like a tomb than a cell, really, because the walls were made of concrete block and the floor was cement, and it had a solid metal door with a small window in it for them to observe me on an hourly basis, write down what I was doing, but they didn't communicate with me. They wouldn't even make eye contact with me, and it was in the rules that they not.
Sunny was given a Bible and a law book, pencil and paper, white pajamas, and a pair of shoes, and nothing else. She read the Bible, searching for answers by randomly opening it and reading whatever it had to say to her. Every day, it told her something she needed to know.
And so one day, it told me that they don't say when I die. They just don't say. They're not really in charge of that. And so I also realized that, in a way, I'd been given a gift. You see, because they were supplying my basic needs. I didn't have to cook, clean, work. I would have loved to be with my children, but I couldn't be, so I really had no responsibilities except one. And that was, whether my life be long or short, to become the best person that I could be. On death row, what happened was I connected. I connected with a source of strength that I guess you have to be pushed into a corner to even look for in your life. I think seeing the face of your own death has a sort of life-affirming effect, you know. It makes those days all the more precious and meaningful.
After 5 years on death row, the judge's illegal death sentence was overturned and Sunny was released into the general prison population. After 5 years of silence, she talked to her fellow inmates non-stop for 3 days until she lost her voice. She had visitors again, and her life had almost regained a sense of normalcy.
Then a year after I was released from death row, my parents decided that maybe they could go on a vacation for once and not have to come to prison. So they dropped my daughter off with Jesse's parents and went on for a holiday. And unfortunately, on the way, the plane crashed and they were killed. And that was the most difficult day of my life. My children were devastated once again. They lost their home and their security in the world. That was the most difficult thing for me. It was the children. I couldn't help them. I felt so helpless.
Then on May 4th, 1990, after 15 years of incarceration, Sunny Jacobs' husband, Jesse Tefero, was executed in the electric chair. After his execution, Sunny's lawyers found a statement by a prison guard who had overheard Walter Rhodes bragging that 2 people were on death row for murders he had committed. That statement had been hidden by the prosecution.
Jesse's lawyers said that had they had that statement before the execution, Jesse never would have been executed, and in fact, it would have been grounds for a new trial. So he might be alive today, tomorrow, for the anniversary of his death. We might be celebrating instead. And that hurts me. It's hard for me. The first year that I was out, on the anniversary, on his birthday, what would have been his birthday, and the anniversary of his death, there was no consolation for me because I was free and he should have been here.
17 years after Sunny and Jesse were sentenced to death, the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals was given proof that witness testimony had been falsified. The results of Walter Rhodes' lie detector test were also falsified. Additional evidence that would have cleared Sunny and Jesse had been suppressed. On October 19, 1992, Sunny's conviction was overturned and she was released from prison.
When I went in, I was a mother, 2 young children, a daughter, and a wife. I was in my 20s. When I came out, I was a widow and an orphan and a grandmother. Who can compensate you for that? Well, the answer is only you can compensate yourself, really. And in a way, maybe that's the answer in all cases. Only you can compensate yourself. So that's what I've chosen to do.
Sunny struggled with her loss, with her anger, and with a sense of betrayal. She was free, but after suffering so many wounds, how could she go on with her life? We'll find out when we talk to her here in the studio right after this.
Just say.
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 Hello.
We've been recounting the amazing story of Sunny Jacobs, who spent 5 years on death row and then an additional 12 years in prison for a crime you didn't commit. Sunny, we're delighted to have you.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
I'm very happy to be here.
The story ends with prison. You eventually get out of prison. What next?
Well, that's my favorite part.
Is it?
Actually, yeah, the getting out part. And the police escorted me to the door with my little box of belongings. That was all I had after 17 years, and opened the door and handed me my box and told me to have a nice life. And I didn't know what to do because there was no one there to tell me. And, you know, in prison, someone always tells you what to do. So I walked over to the stairs and I hesitated because I thought, again, someone would surely say something. No one did. And I took a few steps down the stairs and again I waited. And there was no reaction, so I started down the stairs. And by the time I got to the bottom of the stairs, I was running. I ran down the stairs and I ran down the street. And the sun and the moon were both out at the same time. You know that moment? It was so perfect. And it was in the evening, and I thought, this moment was just made for me. The sun and the moon were there to celebrate the moment with me.
And yet, even at that moment, you have lost practically your whole world. You've lost your husband, Jesse. Your parents are gone. Essentially, you lost the childhood of your children. Why did you make the choice to forgive?
Well, on my own behalf, I did it for myself. Because if I was going to have a beautiful new life, it would be a shame to drag all that muck into it. Hatred and anger and grief and bitterness and revenge and all of those negative things that just would hold me back.
How would you define, in its essence, forgiveness? What is forgiveness?
Letting go.
Just letting it out. Gone.
It's a choice, just like everything. It's a choice. It's choosing healing over revenge. It's choosing life over death. It's choosing to move forward rather than to look backward.
Just an intellectual choice? Okay, I choose to let go. No more. It's gone.
No, that's just the beginning.
So how do you do it?
The intellectual part is the decision. But then you have to get down into the deeper layers, and it has to become a spiritual process.
So, Sonny, who do you blame?
Blaming is useless. It's a waste of time, really. We can figure out what went wrong, but the main thing is to figure out how to fix it. And that's my focus.
So you never thought about blame?
Oh, sure I did. Oh, yeah, a lot in the beginning. But in order to move on, I got over it.
What
I
about
realized that the focus has to be on moving forward. Blame is looking backwards.
So revenge, just a little bit of revenge, or how much revenge satisfies a heart?
Well, that's the point. There is never enough. That's the whole point. I'm glad you asked me. That there's never enough as far as revenge goes, and I've seen that over and over again in different circumstances. So, for me, revenge is not as important as healing. You got to choose, and I chose healing.
I'm sure people who hear your story ask, well, why in the world is that woman not angry? You're not angry, are you?
Occasionally, but that's when I realize I need to do the work again. Because anger takes the place of much more joyful things that I would rather fill my life with.
And when you say do the work again, that means just revisiting forgiveness? Is forgiveness something you just keep revisiting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's
You got to
a
come back
process.
to it again and again.
Yeah, it's like posture. You know?
Stand up straight.
Yep.
Yeah.
You have to. Oh, there I go again.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because I can.
The justice in all of this. Where's the justice?
Just us. That's it.
Oh, I like that. Just us.
Just us.
But what's that mean?
That means that if we each individually take up our responsibility to see that we are just to one another, that's the only justice we're really going to find in this lifetime. Hopefully, social justice will follow.
Should I try to find justice for others?
I think really if each of us concentrated on ourselves, then it would be a better job.
And I can't always find justice for me.
Yeah. It's sort of like a story that someone told me in Ireland about the father and daughter trapeze artists. And she said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll look out for you and you look out for me and we'll be okay." And he said, "No, daughter, you look out for you and I'll look out for me and then we'll be all right." And I think the justice and forgiveness are sort of like that. But I think, yes, once you decide that you will live a just life, you visited upon all of those with whom you have dealings.
Is it possible that in this life justice sometimes is never really done?
And the only justice that you can really count on is the justice that you give yourself. Justice is up to us. So punishment isn't up to us so much. Revenge, saith the Lord, I believe, shouldn't be up to us. So we have to give ourselves justice. In my personal tragedy, I got to a point where I felt that in order to honor the lives that were lost, my own life included, the lives, all the possible lives I could have had, Jesse's life, my parents' lives, my children's lives that they could have had. In order to honor those, it didn't serve me to hold on to the anger and the bitterness and the resentment and the right to compensation. I should be compensated, you see. But I realized that the only one who could compensate me was me. And in this situation, for me to take their mother from them too and replace her with a miserable, old, bitter woman sitting there waiting to be compensated, that's not justice. The only justice that I could bring to the situation was to give them a loving, joyful, open person who can show them, who can be an example to them of what you can do when a tragedy happens and you have nothing and you pick yourself up and you move on and you make it better. And that's what forgiveness did for me. And that's the justice in this situation. I make that. That's my choice. And everybody has that choice. I can't make the whole world right. This big. That's the only part of the world that I control. And within that sphere, I can make the world right. And that's great.
Beautifully put. Thank you, Sonny Jacobs,
Thank
for
you.
sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
God bless you. Would you like to learn more about Sonny's story and her remarkable insights into forgiveness? Sign on to our website, The Evidence, that's one word, theevidence.org, and you'll find additional information we didn't have time for in this episode. We'll be back with some final thoughts right after this.
Learn English and have fun on Hello Channel.
We know where they've taken her.
In a defining time, amid a noble quest, a bond is forged.
We are here to save the princess.
But the princess is sleeping.
Imagine what a little time can do for your family.
The princess is sleeping.
Oh, sorry. Excuse us. Shh.
From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Sonny Jacobs' story stretches the quality of forgiveness to its human limits. But it's people like Sonny, people who have suffered terrible injustices, who show us that forgiveness is the way to rise above the pain, the way out of the anger and bitterness. Human instincts usually send us in the opposite direction. We want to hang on to that hurt, that sense of outrage. We want someone to pay so that we can feel better. But in the end, no one can pay enough to heal our hurt. Atheists and believers alike question how, in the face of so much pain, so much suffering and injustice, how can a loving God possibly exist? But could it be that the human ability to forgive such deep wrong itself comes from the heart of one who offers ultimate forgiveness? Sonny believes the answer is yes. It's stories like Sonny's that persuade me that God does exist. God does care. For me, it's easy to believe in a God who loves like that. That's what I think. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of The Evidence.